One might be asking what I'm doing in a forest when speaking about biases and machine learning. But in a way, it kind of makes sense. You see, machine learning, or artificial intelligence, as we call it, essentially creates extended patterns in data from a set of learned patterns. I chose this particular remote area because it demonstrates a triumph in AI-aided ecological study. One probably wouldn't expect this area, or rather one particular spot in this nearly 3 square mile land of glacial carved ledges to be present in the output of a 4-year machine learning aided study performed at the University of Tennessee. However, in 2006, it was. Using known flight patterns and geological data, the university used a Cray-designed supercomputer called Kraken to model the spread of white nose syndrome in the North American bat population, a deadly disease caused by a certain type of fungus. The study, along with follow-up investigations, is the reason why this cave is currently caged off. It's safe to say that there's no Batman in there. But there are hundreds of bats that are monitored closely for signs of recovery. Machine learning can be used for other things as well, including music generation or music extension. If you've ever wanted to hear a 4-hour extended version of Smash Mouth's All-Star, you can, all thanks to machine learning. It also has practical uses, in the sense that IBM Watson has not only won Jeopardy, but it also is being used by places like the Cleveland Clinic, personalized healthcare plans, and to research various cures for diseases. IBM Watson was part of a WHO study that simulated how the world would handle a potential pandemic. That study was released in November of 2019. Ever since the existence of predictive texting, or T9, mobile phones have been pre-kitted with basic machine learning. Predictive text uses a technique called Markov chaining, essentially attempting to create and use the patterns of your usual typing and syntax to try and attempt to create a basically coherent sentence. Now, it was also around this time that people began to notice something else, and a lot of other equipment that they bought that happened to have machine learning built in became what is known as the Sony DSLR effect. Famously, the camera would not be able to focus on those of Asian descent or those who lived in Asia. The automatic blink detection that the dataset was trained on was fundamentally flawed. Sony infamously created state-of-the-art DSLR cameras that would not autofocus on individuals from most Asian countries, the Sony Blink issue, as it was called. So it was programmed using facial data from European and North American countries. Now, in 2019, Nature published an article about how the very system I referenced earlier, IBM Watson, had a bias against African Americans. The study published in October of that year, it found that assumptions made based on income, insurance status, and self-identification, hospitals were, as a result, 47.3% less likely to refer Black people to a secondary care source. When it comes to our phones, our photos, our personal identities, we give a lot to large tech companies by merely turning them on. And yet an application released last year to depixelize photos by reconstructing the patterns it identified could create a realistic Mario, although infamously it would turn Barack Obama into a white man. There's been a new push to remove biases. An article published on January 2nd, 2020 in the New York Times called for a new field to combat racial bias in machine learning. Just south of Akron University is BGI Industries, one of the area's largest developers of machine learning. It was formed by former Northrop Information Technologies employees. As an ethical note, I must disclose I was a former employee of Northrop Infotech. The exact nature of their work is currently unknown. However, it is known that they are contracted by the United States Air Force, which uses pixel scaling and facial recognition technologies to identify packages. Somewhere there exists a database of faces. And I'm left to wonder, the fact that I've played video games online with Chelsea Manning, the fact that I was raised Muslim, the fact that I have 2 immigrant parents, that I have been to the Middle East at various parts of my life, does that put me on that list of faces? Or perhaps even scarier, is there a face that closely matches my face, yet not exactly, in that database, creating a new pattern to morph it to look somewhat a bit more like me? That, however, is a mere collection. And if it does indeed exist, its use would be unethical at best. Now, what would happen if someone was willing to go against the cycle and willfully create a biased dataset, justifying it by words that some like Emily Gersinski have classified as dog whistles? There's an application currently on the Apple and Android platforms called Giggle. The application's creator says a giggle is a term for a collection of girls. She does this by using the rationale that a gaggle is a collection of women. The truth is that it's not. In fact, as defined by the Oxford Dictionary, the word girl is technically unisex, almost relative to its existence, used to refer to children, not exclusively to young women. This is the dataset that I was referencing. The application on the About page makes it clear. Trans women like myself aren't included. Formerly, the website referenced using biometric data. Now it only refers to using and continuously monitoring photos and interactions to identify individuals whom were not born female. The issue is that there's no possible way to classify what a born female looks like. The human face is different, and no identifying markers for sex that can be shared. Thinner chins, smoother faces, less sunken features. Individuals of binary birth sexes can share one, if not all, of these traits. While the application claims that it's scientific, in actuality, this is pseudoscience. The idea that you could identify a gender by look, by modeling, or by examining merely a photograph, even if it does a rudimentary depth map, creating a 3D model, is what we'd classify as phrenology. And using constant monitoring and machine learning to model what a woman looks like is unethical and nonsensical. It adds to the problem of bias in the field. It is incredibly influenced by the team who creates it. Greg Stevens, a data scientist for 10 years, wrote his PhD dissertation on neural network models. A private message agreed, calling it unethical and machine learning phrenology. Greg is now a writer and host of the series Unraveling on TST.TV, along with heading the ordination program for the Satanic Temple. We all know that companies and applications store our data to mine and cache. However, Giggle goes one step further. They have a team consistently monitoring the platform, looking at photos, and while I can't confirm, likely reading any private messages sent, including messages in the sex worker specific section. I said likely, as it was discovered almost all user data was arbitrarily accessible with openly available tools meant for network testing and monitoring. This has been patched, but to the degree of which, it's not currently known. This means, however, that from the inception of the application until September 10th, sex workers' private discussions, personal application preferences, and photos were open for anyone who would download a zip file. With that said, why would anybody promote this? Why would someone voluntarily contribute to the bias issues by furthering it? I'm not here to make judgment, but when a platform says it's female only, and my birth certificate, driver's license, and medical records all say I'm female, and it's actively remotely removing me and many others from such female-only spaces, then is it female only? Or is it merely arbitrarily a female-only space, powered completely by a bias and privacy invasion? There are alternatives, though. Applications like Her, found at www.weareher.com, are working to be inclusive to all women and not practicing science considered to be nonsense by the 1950s, and only practiced by individuals in specific communities that often use it to promote hatred towards not just women, but all power minority individuals. Thank you for spending a few minutes with Alejandra. And if you'd like to hear a more extended discussion, you can follow me on Patreon, where I'll upload an example of a Markov chain generated using responses and data solely from Sally Grover, founder of Giggles. And with that, I would like to go ahead and swing on back from Ohio and the Allegheny Plains to you, Victory.